And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off.
Go ahead and say it, Ed. Go Tigers!
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
You like that? You like that?
F it. Jamar's down there somewhere.
The New Orleans Saints select Marcus Davenport.
No!
Splash Brothers. Yeah.
It's playoff. Keep going, Brace.
The playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
For your starters and pick up some handcuffs for your guys, or also handcuffs for guys around the league as we've been seeing some more injuries pop up. So, but first we're going to go ahead and get started with a word of prayer, and got kind of the same prayer requests we've had for the last several weeks: Norkay, Meredith, and then Jonesboro and Israel. And Lord, just thank you for letting us enjoy this wonderful game that you've let us have, Lord, and just please be with Norkay. She's undergoing these treatments, and we're also trying to find a bone marrow match for her, Lord. If you could just make that possible, because that's one of the parts of her treatment, that she'll need a bone marrow transplant. And as she's undergoing her treatments, Lord, just give her strength and courage and understanding and resiliency, Lord, and as well as that with her family, Lord, and her doctors and providers. And just put your hand over her and guide her through this. And we just pray for complete healing for her, Lord. Just please be with Jonesboro as they're still recovering from these tragedies, and just be with the families that have been affected. And just please help them heal in this process and turn to you, Lord, and just spread your name in this terrible tragedy, Lord. Same thing with Israel. Just please be with these people affected, all the families, the loved ones that have died. Please be with the people that are being attacked. Please put a hedge of protection over them, and please also be with the attackers and help them understand to stop attacking Israel, Lord, and be with them and help them turn toward you and understand what they're doing. It's not in your name, Lord. And then also one other one I want to add, the families that are affected by the stabbings at Louisiana Tech University yesterday, Lord. From what I understand, there was a couple people that passed away, Lord, and that hopefully they're with you and be with their families as they're grieving and going through this, but also be with the ones that are still in critical condition, Lord. And also be with the young gentleman that did this, Lord, as we know you don't support this, but if anyone can change his heart and be with him, Lord, because we want everyone to come to know you, Lord. And just please let us go and shine a light for you, Lord, and just spread your name. And thank you for all the blessings you continue to give us. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. So jumping right on in, we want to go ahead and start with our sponsors. I want to thank Big Reed BBQ, Automotive Detailing Solutions, This Little Piggy Barbecue Food Truck, Mimi's Children's Boutique, and Doug Damona Farm and Feed. Thank you guys for supporting us. We really appreciate it, and definitely couldn't do a lot of what we do without y'all's support. But our title sponsor for this this segment's going to be This Little Piggy Barbecue Food Truck. It's a food truck based in Jonesboro that brings the best barbecue around to the people. You can find This Little Piggy and owner Kyle Terrell set up events and festivals all around Jackson Parish and surrounding areas. To keep track of when you can get your hands on some amazing brisket and pulled pork, follow This Little Piggy on Facebook. And one day I'm going to get a chance to track him down and get some of that great pulled pork and brisket I've heard several people talk about and say how good it is. If y'all do see him, and like Clay said before, he also does a lot of charity and donation work, so please support him if you can. And then moving right on into our waiver pod, obviously we got our start sit sleeper pod coming up at the end of the week, but jumping right on into the waiver for week 11, man, did it get here fast, crazy fast. But we're going to start off with our quarterbacks as we always do. And boy, this one's going to hurt a lot of New Orleans Saints fans, as he definitely carved us up this past weekend. But Josh Dobbs has got to be number one from Minnesota. I only owned in 38.9% of leagues. I mean, anybody local here, Saints fans that watched the game this past weekend, seen Dobbs firsthand and what he can do with this Minnesota offense. And we've seen him be fairly successful in Arizona, kind of tailed off a little bit there for the last couple of weeks, but it almost kind of makes you wonder if maybe they were trying to gear up to see what they had in Clayton Tune more than focusing on what Josh Dobbs could do. But in Minnesota, they're sold out because they ain't got nobody they want to start behind Josh Dobbs, not preferably. And he's getting Justin Jefferson back in the next week or two. Probably not this week, but it could be. I know they said he's been practicing more. So if he does get him back, another big plus. But, man, TJ Hawkinson, he made him look good. Jordan Addison had a decent day. KJ Osborne wasn't even playing. And he lost Alexander Madison, but that didn't even matter because Lord knows Alexander Madison has hardly been relevant most of the year anyway. But honestly, Dobbs is – arguably a top 10 quarterback, maybe top 12 for the rest of the season with this Minnesota offense. And in the 2 games in Minnesota, he's had at least 27 points against some decent defenses against the pass in Atlanta and New Orleans. And he's really kind of got a cake schedule coming up, at least for the next several games. And the situation, it kind of looks like one that if you picked up Dobbs kind of speculatively, he might be somebody that you could ride on into the fantasy playoffs and possibly through the fantasy playoffs because Minnesota needs to win, and he's able to do it. And this week they're going to be at Denver. Now, Denver's been playing a lot better here of late than they have been this year, but New Orleans' defense wasn't no joke either, and he made them look pretty silly this past weekend. And the longer he's there, the more comfortable he's going to get in that offense, and the more comfortable he's going to get with his pass catchers and offensive line. Josh Dobbs is looking like a pretty solid quarterback option the rest of the year. Number 2 for me is going to be Kyler Murray for Arizona. Told you to pick him up last week. This week he comes out, has a okay fantasy day, but what I really liked was he rushed the ball 6 times. But he's only owned in 54.7% of leagues. This week he's going to be at Houston, which is kind of a tough matchup because their defense has been playing okay this year. But honestly, the 17.2 fantasy points is probably going to be around his floor for the rest of the year if he keeps running the ball 6 to 10 times a game. And honestly, and also, we also seen Josh Dobbs just put up like 27 on Atlanta with Houston, and then Kyler Murray comes out and only has like 17, which is another reason that I kind of had Dobbs above Murray. Also because Dobbs has a lot better team and schedule coming up than Murray does. But I do think Murray's going to be a very probably low-end 12-team quarterback. Maybe, he's been a top 10 quarterback for several years when he's healthy, and he's still got weapons. He's still got James Conner. He's still got Marquise Brown. He's still got Trey McBride. All solid playmakers in that offense, and their defense is terrible, so they're going to have to put up points to win. And, hey, if you're going to lose, you may as well be entertaining, as I've heard some guys from the Fox Sports Radio, Sean Fox show, talk about just a little bit before I got on here. Shout out to them. But also, Arizona's schedule is, like I said, not as good as Minnesota's coming up. But with Murray's rushing down floor, he's really going to give you a pretty solid, 15 to 17 every week with that possibility of, 25 to 30. He's got a high ceiling with that rushing and and he's got a good arm, terrible defense. So they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Honestly, I like him a lot for the rest of the season as well. If you don't need a quarterback, pick him up and find somebody that does and see if you can get a trade in on him. Find somewhere that you can strengthen the rest of your team with even if you don't need him, or just hold him on the bench just so nobody else can use him if he's one of the more valuable assets on the waiver wire in your league. That's another, you're going to hear me talk about that several times for several players. If there's guys on this list that you don't need them, but they're the best guy out there, and you got somebody that's not doing anything but taking up a bench spot on IR or whatever, pick them up. That way somebody else can't pick them up and use them against you in the future. That's just playing good defense in fantasy. Also, number 3 for me at quarterback is going to be Baker Mayfield. Not this week, though, or I don't feel great about it this week. This week he's going to be at San Francisco, but last week we told you to get Baker. If you went out and got him, you got 23 points out of him, which was a solid week. And honestly, Baker's been solid most of the year. Another 20-something point week. I think we talked about it on the last Start Sit pod when we had Baker on there. Hasn't had but a couple games this year with less than 20 fantasy points. Now, this week he is playing at San Francisco. And he also had an injury scare last game, but they've already come out and said he won't even miss any practice time, so don't worry about that. But this at San Francisco matchup is going to be tough because that pass rush is legit. They're starting to look like they're coming into their own. Now, Tampa Bay's offense is good, but their defense is terrible. So San Fran's going to probably put some points up, so Baker and them are going to be trying to score. Could be a dangerous game for him with a fair amount of turnovers if they get kind of reckless, and Baker has been known to do that. So just keep an eye on that. But after San Fran, they've got several really decent games coming up for them, especially being in the NFC South. We all know not a lot of competition there on defense other than the Saints, really. But that's going to round out my quarterbacks, just 3 this week. And those are the 3 that I like. And if one of them's out there and you need help, definitely go get them. Now, running back. Like I said, I'm going to talk about some handcuffs. It's going to start here in the running back. And then I'm going to try not to talk a ton about a lot of these guys because there's several that I want to talk about. So I'm just going to try to go through them as fast as I can. I've got them in order of where I think that they should be really picked up, kind of. And it really depends on what you need and for how long you need, which I'll talk about that as we go. But number one's got to be Ty Chandler for me in Minnesota. He was already, before Alexander Madison got knocked out with a concussion during the game, he was already sharing the workload with Alexander Madison. Since Cam Akers went down, looked like Ty Chandler really just stepped into that role, and he is a much better pass catcher than Cam Akers and Alexander Madison, honestly. He was a great pass catcher when he was in Detroit the last couple of years. So Ty Chandler, Minnesota, he's only owned in like 2.8% league, so he should be out there. He gets the Denver defense that's 32nd in the league against running backs. And honestly, he's going to have solid volume this week. I mean, he's going to get a workhorse load this week, I'm sure. And then even if he only gets 2/3 of it with the other backup in Guanu there, but they like Ty Chandler way better than him. And I really feel like it's going to be probably at least like a 70-30, 80-20 split with Ty Chandler getting the most of the load. And with Josh Dobbs running this offense now, with his rushing threat, I think that's going to open up even more for the running backs in Minnesota. And good news for Ty Chandler. And even when Madison does come back, which I doubt he clears for concussion protocol this week, when he does come back, it's still, I think, going to be a 50-50 workload with Ty Chandler probably getting the passing volume. So he's probably going to be the guy you want at the second half of the season going down the stretch. Number 2 for me is going to be Darrell Henderson for the Rams. I guess a lot of people forgot about him. He did have a great game right before their bye. Royce Freeman kind of out-touched him and outperformed him, but we're coming back off their bye. One more week, and then Kyren Williams comes back. After Kyren Williams comes back, he's going to be completely irrelevant, I think. But if you need a running back for one more week like I do, because I got Kamara in a league, and he's going on a bye, and I got nobody on the bench, Darrell Henderson might be your guy because they're going up against Seattle this week. And I really think with Stafford coming back and not having to start, what was it, Brett Ripien, I think. I can't even remember who their quarterback was. But with Stafford coming back, him and Darrell Henderson have a better chemistry than Royce Freeman. And I really expect Darrell Henderson to step back into that solid role as their RB1 there. And he's a 1-week rental pretty much unless there's another injury. But they said they completely expect Kyren Williams to come back next week. And so I think Darrell Henderson has a solid shot to come out and do something this week for sure. But yeah, I really think that he's got a chance to come out and do something a little bit more productive with Matthew Stafford in the backfield. And that's Darrell Henderson. Number 3 for me, it's got to be Devin Singletary. Unfortunately, I honestly never seen myself putting this guy on this list, but after he gets 31 touches and has 160 yards from scrimmage, 150 rushing yards and a catch for 11 yards, I mean, he's earned a spot on this. And honestly, if Pierce misses another week, they're playing against Arizona, which is like, I think the 31st. I didn't put a lot of the ranks and defenses in this list because I'm trying to roll through it a little bit faster. But they're like in the top, like they're like 30th or 31st against the running backs in fantasy this year so far. So he's up for an even better matchup than he had last week. And if Houston's blowing out Arizona like we probably expect them to be, there's a good chance he gets another high volume game without Dameon Pierce. He might be another 1 week rental guy, even though when Dameon Pierce comes back, Devin Singletary is it's probably going to be a 50-50 workload. But Devin Singletary's number 3 for him. Number 4 is going to be Keaton Mitchell. Not quite at the volume that we want to see, but man, is he explosive. I mean, he just busts out some explosive runs, just like it's just crazy because he looks just like Devin A-Chain. Only unfortunately for him, he's in a 3-headed backfield right now. But I mean, it was what we thought was going to happen. Justice Hill got about a third. Keaton Mitchell got a third. Gus Bus got a third, and Gus Bus got the goal line work. But Mitchell was far superior in efficiency and explosiveness for this team. And then coming off a tough loss at Cleveland at home to Cleveland at home, I think this offense is going to be looking to shake it up, get something fresh going. And if they're looking for anything like that against Cincinnati, it's going to be Keaton Mitchell. Cincinnati's ranked 16th against the run defense, but they just gave up 150 yards and a touchdown to Devin Singletary last week. And I believe, without a doubt, Mitchell is extremely more athletic and explosive than Devin Singletary. And I really think that the workload only grows from here for Keaton Mitchell. He's still probably not somebody you want to start at RB2, probably just a solid flex play, maybe a bye-week fill-in for you. But I think he's somebody you want on your bench because if Gus Edwards gets hurt, Justice Hill gets hurt, if he gets 50% of that workload, I mean, you could be looking at a low-end RB2 already with 50% workload in this offense. So like Keaton Mitchell a lot at number 4. Number 5 for me is going to be Antonio Gibson for Washington. Talked about him on the last week. Came out, did his thing, another 5 catches with a touchdown for like 40 yards. He only had 4 rushes for like, I think it was like 30 yards or something like that. But still seen him getting about 40% of the snap count. And honestly, I don't expect anything to change from Antonio Gibson. I think that's a pretty solid day for him. I think he's got about a floor of anywhere from 8 to 10 points, but he's got that upside if he gets that touchdown of 16 or so. But Brian Robinson had an outstanding day, was RB1 on the week. And you still seen them using Antonio Gibson with as well as Brian Robinson was playing, which tells you they're not going to phase him out, even if Robinson's playing well. Their roles are what they are. And he kind of has a dual purpose for you if you pick him up. He is somebody that has flex value right now. And if you're in a bind, maybe RB2. If I don't get anybody, I have him in that league that I need a sub for this week. If I don't pick up anybody, I'll be starting an Antonio Gibson against the Giants. That's right, the Giants. I think it's the 30th team or 29th team against running backs. Defense against running backs in the league. I will be starting him at my RB2, unfortunately, but if you got to do it, I think you could do worse because he's going to get the passing floor that you need with an opportunity to get a touchdown. And also, that's part of his value. The other part is he's pretty high in handcuff because if anything happens to Brian Robinson in this offense, man, Antonio Gibson is going to be a workhorse. I don't know who they bring. I mean, they could bring in that the other guy they got there. I'm not even 100% sure who he is. Give me a second, I'll tell you. But they could bring him in to share that workload. And Chris Rodriguez, the guy that he's kind of had his moments, but honestly, I mean, he hasn't even had a carry the last 3 weeks, and he's been active. So I would not expect much out of him if something were to happen to Robinson. So that's why Antonio Gibson kind of sneaks into this top 5 for me at running backs for a pickup because he has dual purpose because he still has flex value. And then that's going to pretty much be my running backs. Like, I think if you need to pick up and start, those are guys that I think you can pick up and start, especially with Gibson against that terrible Giants defense. If there's a chance Washington blows them out, I think Gibson gets even more run than Brian Robinson. Now I'm going to go through some handcuffs real quick to have at running back. Try not to elaborate too much, but these are guys that have a minimum of RB2 value if the guy ahead of them goes down. They have some value already, but not as much to me as the guys that I just talked about. That's why I have a whole separate list for handcuffs to have at running back. Number 1's got to be Dante Foreman. He's owned in 52.1% leagues. They're going up against Detroit, which is a pretty tough matchup this week. But honestly, I expect him to be pretty much phased out with Herbert coming back. which he has not been officially named yet. So if Herbert does not come back, Dante Foreman jumps all the way up to probably number 3 on my list up there above for running backs. But he is expected to come back, Khalil Herbert. But if he goes down or gets hurt again, and Dante Foreman could still be in this backfield, but I mean, Chicago, there's no telling what they're going to do, and they seem like they're married to Khalil Herbert like they were before the season. I mean, we could see Dante Foreman go back to the practice squad for all we know. But he is somebody, if Herbert gets hurt, he is more than capable to take on a workhorse load, and we've seen what he's done with it and be a low-end RB2. Number 2 is going to be Zach Charbonnet for me for Seattle, owned in 31.4% leagues. Going up against the Rams this week, he's been extremely efficient. He's had an increased workload and snap count, but he doesn't get the touches when he's on the field like Kenneth Walker does, who has been great whenever he does get the touches. He came back. We weren't sure how healthy he was going to be, but he came out and freaking hammered it last week. And unfortunately for Charbonnet, just reinforced Seattle to let them know, hey, I'm the man, give me the ball. But if Kenneth Walker gets hurt, like he has an injury history, Charbonnet jumps right into a solid RB2, not a low-end RB2 to me. If Kenneth Walker gets hurt, I think Zach Charbonnet is a middle RB2, if not high-end RB2, with that workload for that Seattle team. So he's definitely somebody, if you don't have, and if you have Kenneth Walker, you better get Zach Charbonnet on your team and set him on your bench, because he is somebody you've got to have going down this stretch, making a playoff run or getting ready for the playoffs. Because the last thing you want to do is have one of your stud running backs go down and somebody else has got his backup on their bench, and you're sitting there having to pick up another one of these guys trying to fill in whenever you could have the starter with the same value. And I think Zach Charbonnet could produce like Kenneth Walker if he had the opportunity. But number 3 on this handcuff list is going to be Tajay Spears, who could arguably be number 1 or 2. Honestly, a lot of these guys could be interchangeable. But Tajay Spears owned in 32.6% leagues. He has some value because he does get the passing work, but unfortunately for him, he's not as efficient and it's not as high of a volume as Antonio Gibson. But he essentially serves the same role Antonio Gibson does, only for Tennessee's offense, which is not near as good as Washington's offense, unfortunately for Tennessee. And but this week they're going up against Jacksonville, and I really feel like any day they're just going to turn the reins over to Spears because their offense and their team is just completely spiraling. I really don't see them doing anything this year, and they're honestly just kind of wasting some of the last of the good years of Derrick Henry. Unfortunately, I was really hoping that they would trade him and Tajay Spears would get his chance, because I think Henry could do better on a better team, and I think Tajay Spears could really do something for fantasy on this team if he had the workload and the opportunity. So I think that he's somebody you keep an eye on, because if they do end up just kind of sitting, making up a faux injury for Derrick Henry so he could just kind of chill out the rest of the season without quote unquote benching him, because if you bench Derrick Henry, you're pretty much crazy, because he's way better than Tajay Spears. But Tajay Spears is honestly probably the future of this running backfield. And I think they're going to eventually want to see what they have in him if they give him a full workhorse workload. And if they do that, he is going to be very valuable. So he's somebody that if you got Derrick Henry, you might want to have on your bench. And even if you don't, and you got somewhere to stash somebody, he's not a terrible person to stash. Number 4 for me is going to be Rico Dowdle for Dallas, owned in 3.2% of leagues. And this week they're going to be at Carolina. Honestly, he could have value this week because they're going to probably blow the doors off Carolina like they just did New York Giants. And Rico Dowdle had a decent day and had a 50-50 workload with Tony Pollard, which unfortunately for Tony Pollard's owners, they have not seen him have a decent game since like week 1, it seems like, when the last time he scored a touchdown. And honestly, that's just because they've been blowing everybody out and haven't had to use him that much, and kind of been, I really think, just holding him back, saving him for the playoffs, because they're looking like they're going to be a solid playoff team. But also, if something were to happen to Pollard, Dowdle looks like he's going to be the guy. And he's looked good in moments whenever he's had an opportunity. I don't know if he is going to be as good or explosive as like Spears or Charbonnet or Gibson if he got the opportunity, but he's got a pretty decent schedule for the next couple weeks with Dallas. And like I said, if they're blowing them out like they have been and their defense has been dominating, there's a good chance they're going to lean heavier on the run game. I mean, they've been throwing the ball a lot, but Dowdle catches the ball fine. And Pollard's been riding. I mean, last week against the Giants, I don't even think he played the second half. And Dowdle got all the work. So with favorable matchups the next couple of weeks, Dowdle could be somebody you want to have on your bench. And if you're in a bind, might need to start. Or if something happens to Pollard, he's definitely going to be somebody with RB2 value. And that's going to round out my running backs. And we're going to roll right on into our wide receivers. And we've got a couple guys at wide receivers that have value right now and value in the future at handcuffs. But number one's got to be Noah Brown. That's got a little bit of both value. He's for Houston, owned in 27% of leagues. This week he's going to be going up against Arizona. When Nico Collins has been out for the last couple weeks, Noah Brown has had at least 150 yards receiving and 26 fantasy points the last 2 weeks, at least when Nico Collins is out, okay? I mean, that might have owned him a role in this offense as well. But not only that, something I heard on a fantasy pod that I was listening to earlier today, he is one of the best run-blocking wide receivers in the league, which that in itself is what got Robert Woods, or a.k.a. Bobby Trees, as the guys from NFL Network like to call him, what he kind of made his hay to get on the field for most of his career is because Robert Woods is one of the best run-blocking wide receivers. And he's been banged up, and Noah Brown has had his opportunity, and, man, has he cashed in. And with Collins having this calf injury, not really having an update, and he kind of must have re-aggravated it during the week because he was practicing and then he stopped practicing halfway through the week last week. So that's never really not good for a wide receiver to re-aggravate an injury like that later in the week. There's a solid chance Collins could be out. This week he's going to get Arizona, which is one of the worst teams and defenses in the league against wide receivers. And honestly, even when Collins comes back, the way that Houston – their offense has been efficient in the pass game, and C.J. Stroud's been throwing the ball. Man, they almost might could support 3 wide receivers for this offense, especially if they don't run the ball as much as they have. So I like Noah Brown a lot. He's definitely somebody you pick up. Has a good matchup this week to start, and then honestly a really solid handcuff in the future for this team, and maybe even a role in this offense if they decide to roll with him a little bit more. Number 2 for me has got to be Tyler Boyd. Honestly, for Cincinnati, owned at 57.1% leagues. Really tough matchup this week. If it wasn't for him playing at Baltimore, he would have been number 1, and then I had Noah Brown at number 2. But with him having that matchup this week, even with Higgins being out, that's a tough matchup. I think Noah Brown's got a solid chance to have a better week this week than Boyd. And if Higgins comes back after this week, then Boyd's going to go back to his third wide receiver role, which is not as productive, and somebody where Tyler Boyd is pretty much just another high-end wide receiver handcuff for if Chase or Higgins misses any time, Boyd steps in immediately and has wide receiver 2 upside. And that's where he's sitting at right now. And honestly, we had a good feeling that he was going to emerge. There were some kind of grumblings of this Trent Irwin. Man, Trent Irwin is not Tyler Boyd. As Tyler Boyd kind of come out and made his statement with 12 targets, 8 catches for 177 yards last week. And Higgins was just labeled week to week last week. So it's probably doubtful that he returns this week because you don't normally get labeled week to week and only miss 1 week. That's normally day to day, and then maybe you miss, but week to week, you're going to miss at least 1 and probably at least 2 weeks. And right now, Higgins is labeled week to week. No new update on him. But considering that Cincinnati plays Baltimore on Thursday night, really good chance that Higgins does not come back for that, and Tyler Boyd is a wide receiver 2 again in that offense, and wide receiver 2 really in rankings. So I like Tyler Boyd a lot. Number 3's got to be Jackson Smith and Jigba or JSN for Seattle, owned in 58.8% of leagues at going up against the Los Angeles Rams. He is really just a high-end wide receiver handcuff with flex value. Arguably the number 1 wide receiver handcuff in the league, really, even higher than maybe – it'd be tough to argue him and Boyd and Brown. But when Metcalf or Lockett are missing, he has a solid floor in this offense, and Geno Smith feels very comfortable. Honestly, he's been getting flex value targets and low-end wide receiver 3 value for the last couple weeks, and I just think he's somebody that should be owned, probably not started in all leagues, but owned at least. And if you have a bye week or injury problems, he has a lot of upside if one of these wide receivers goes down in the game. I mean, and not only that, but they've been targeting him some in the end zone. So I like Jackson Smith and Jigba a lot, especially going down the stretch if one of those Metcalf or Lockett gets hurt. And both of them have been battling injuries all year, and JSN's just waiting for his chance to get more opportunity. And then number 4 is going to be Jaden Reed for Green Bay. And honestly, he's only owned in 15.1% leagues, but this week he gets the Los Angeles Chargers. He almost didn't even make the column, honestly. I mean, I was sitting there writing this column, and thought I finished the wide receiver, and then just going through one last look through the players and what he's been doing. And honestly, he really reminds me of Keaton Mitchell for wide receivers. Somebody that is like kind of looked like Tank Dell at the beginning of the year, been making plays for Green Bay's offense intermittently all year. And he's probably the sole reason that Christian Watson's dad has taken to social media about Christian Watson's usage, because they just can't stop involving Jaden Reed because he keeps making plays for them. I mean, every week that he's gotten at least 5 targets, he has averaged at least 10 fantasy points. If he's gotten more than 5 targets, he's averaged at least 10 fantasy points. And as of late, he's really been their playmaker for Green Bay in this offense. In this week, he gets the 28th ranked defense against wide receivers in the Los Angeles Chargers. And Green Bay's in a position where they really need to win to kind of keep any playoff hopes alive. So he's a very worthy flex play this week. And honestly, if they start using him even more with his playmaking ability, he's even had some carries out of the backfield. He could be somebody sneak into that wide receiver 3 range. And that's Jaden Reed. And then last but certainly not least is Demario Douglas for New England, owned in 27.2% leagues. And you know that he is somebody that you probably need to target because he's on a bye this week. So he's going to get dropped in a lot of leagues. And for me to put somebody on this list that isn't even playing anybody this week should tell you he has solid low-end wide receiver 2 value right now. And solid flex, low-end wide receiver 2 because of the volume he's seen in the passing game. And honestly, he's been their number 1 pass catcher in New England for the last, I think, 3 or 4 weeks at least. And even if they bench Mac Jones and Baylor Zappi is the quarterback, it doesn't even matter because Zappi was coming in looking for him clearly in the game, even at the end of the game for the last like possession when they were trying to win the game. Baylor Zappi was going to Mario Douglas whenever they intercepted the ball. So I really think if you got space to pick him up and stash him for this bye week, I think he's somebody you could plug in at your flex going down the stretch. He's really got a floor of around 10 to 12 points with the volume of the passing he's got. And then if he gets a touchdown, you're talking about a solid wide receiver 2 easy. And he's playing like 90% of the snaps. So Demario Douglas for New England, really like him a lot going down the stretch. If you got somewhere to stash him, pick him up, stash him. He could really help you out going down the stretch, especially as New England has to pass the ball a lot because their defense is not that great this year. But that's going to round out my wide receivers, going to roll right into my tight ends. And it's a pretty short column like my quarterback column was, only 3 of them for you. But number 1, and this is probably my number 1 pickup if this is your need, my number 1 pickup of all the players, and that's got to be Trey McBride. If you need a tight end, Trey McBride's got to be your number 1 priority. And honestly, if you have a low-end tight end, one, like, a low-end one like David Njoku or, it's hard to say Evan Ingram, but he's kind of phased out a little bit here lately. But somebody that's just kind of been here and there all year, Kyle Pitts. If you got Kyle Pitts, Trey McBride is your guy. All right, he's owned for Arizona, owned in 50.8% leagues, going at Houston this week. But just when we thought tight end was a lost hope, a hero emerges. All right, just like Star Wars. No, I'm just kidding. But Trey McBride comes out and emerges, and with Kyler Murray's help, we're talking about a top 5 fantasy tight end on the waiver wire in week 11. Okay. Top 5 going out. I'm calling it right now. If Kyler Murray stays the quarterback for the rest of the year for the Arizona Cardinals, Trey McBride is a top 5 fantasy tight end for the rest of the year. And he's out there in 50% of leagues in week 11. Last week, 9 targets, 8 catches for 131 yards. Trey McBride hasn't even played with Kyler Murray until practice since he got activated, until this game. 9 targets, 8 catches, 131 yards. This week, he gets the Houston defense that is 31st ranked defense against tight end in the league. And I mean, he's got a couple tougher matchups down the stretch, but I really think that he is a solid tight end start the rest of the way. If you need tight end help, Trey McBride's your guy. Pick him up because he will not be on this column next week because there's no doubt he'll be over 60% owned. Number 2 for me has got to be Tyler Conklin for the Jets. There's really not a lot of other options out there. But Tyler Conklin owned in 11.1% of leagues. This week he's going to be up against Buffalo. But honestly, we've seen Conklin on this list before, and even last year, he's definitely not near as concrete as McBride. Nobody is, and nobody probably has been most of the year. But honestly, you can't ignore the volume he's had the last couple of weeks. He's had at least 6 targets with at least 6 catches for at least 66 yards the last 2 weeks. And I really think that this is an effort. This is an effect of Garrett Wilson getting more targets and being more effective on the outside, and it's really opening up the middle of the field for Tyler Conklin, and Zach Wilson's taking advantage of that. Now, I will say, we don't know who the quarterback for the Jets is going to be in the future because Zach Wilson's not been that great the last couple of weeks, but Conklin's got a decent matchup going up against Buffalo, and Buffalo just gave up 101 yards and 2 touchdowns to Cincinnati tight ends 2 weeks ago. So if you're in a jam and you need a tight end for this week, for bye weeks or injuries or whatever, you could do worse than having Tyler Conklin going up against Buffalo. And then last but certainly not least, this is a deep league ad, and really just a gut call on me. Like, I just feel it in my gut that he's just going to step up and be more productive going on the stretch. But Michael Mayer for Las Vegas, for the Raiders, only owned in 3.3% of leagues. This week he's going up against Miami, which is a pretty solid matchup. But honestly, he just has a high pedigree, was a really touted high prospect getting drafted, kind of like Dalton Kincaid for Buffalo. He just really hadn't panned out this year. His opportunity hasn't been there. Him and Garoppolo never could get on the same page. And there's really not a lot of statistical data to back up why I think this. But I just feel like with the coaching change, the quarterback change with Aiden O'Connell taking over, Antonio Pierce taking over at coach, the quarterback taking over Aiden O'Connell. I really feel like they're going to try to utilize Mike Mayer's above average athleticism and playmaking ability at the tight end position going forward. And honestly, last week, 5 targets, 3 catches for 19 yards, but a touchdown. So they were looking for him in the end zone. Nothing to really catch your eye, but it's more usage than what he's been seeing. And he could be somebody that if you need help at tight end, you either stash him or maybe you just throw him in your lineup because he's going up against Miami this week and cross your fingers. But Miami's the 22nd worst defense in the league against tight end. And honestly, I just think maybe down the stretch, Mayer's got a chance to be more involved in this passing game, and him and Aiden O'Connell kind of get some chemistry going as Aiden O'Connell maybe looks to check it down or go over the middle of the field more, with Devontae Adams being more of a threat down the sideline and a deep threat in the offense for the second half of the year. I think that's going to maybe open up some more stuff for Michael Mayer. So I like him as a speculative ad and maybe a bench stash going down for the rest of the season. And then that's going to wrap up my tight ends. And I'm going to give you a couple streaming options that you might want to look up to pick up. My number 1 by far is going to be Miami versus Las Vegas. I know I just talked about Mayer going up against Miami, but honestly, Miami's defense with Jalen Ramsey coming back, their offense being as good as they are, I feel like it's just a matter of time till that defense really starts getting clicking. Their defensive line is a lot better than they've played, and they've got Las Vegas. Aiden O'Connell, he might be a solid rookie, but he's still a rookie, and I guarantee Miami's going to give him some looks that he's never seen before. And I not to mention he's never seen. I mean, he's got Jalen Ramsey on one side of the field he's going to have to deal with. It's probably going to be on Devontae Adams for most of the game. But also, Miami has a really nice defensive schedule coming up with some solid matchups for the rest of the year. So I think Miami's maybe a defense that you pick up and you hang on to and can start for multiple weeks going forward. And then second for me is going to be Detroit against Chicago. If Taylor Badgett starts, Detroit, I mean, we've seen what he looked like last week on Thursday Night Football. Carolina, really made him look not that great, and their defense did well against him. And Detroit's defense is way better than Carolina's. Also, even if Justin Fields comes back, I'm not sure he's 100%, and I like Detroit's odds against a not 100% Justin Fields versus a lot of other defenses for this week streaming. So those are two that are available in like 70% leagues that I like a lot for this week. And that's going to round out our waiver wire pod for week 11. First of all, I just want to thank our listeners. We appreciate y'all listening. Please like, subscribe, download the pod. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you want to hear of, what you don't want to hear more of. Please go out, support our sponsors because without, we really appreciate them supporting us, and we want you to support them if you like listening to our pod. And also be with the people that we're praying about in Norway, Jonesboro, Israel, the people, the families involved in the tech stabbings. Please just pray for them and thoughts and prayers with them. Just thank you for everybody. And we'll be coming back at you later on this week with the Start Sit Sleeper pod. Be looking for the waiver graphic and the Start Sit Sleeper graphic coming up. And good luck on your waivers, and we'll catch y'all later this week. Keep chasing that trophy, guys.